Chopin D-flat Nocturne, Opus 27, number 2. Again, a miraculous performance, David. That golden sound, it's very good use of the pedal. I mean, the pedal is there, but it's almost not to be heard in a way.
You know, I don't understand the way he plays certain scale formations. It's as if it was pointillist. It's
yes, but with a very different kind of pointillism than one is used to, for example, with the great Vladimir Horowitz.
Oh, indeed. You were saying that you just don't know, after listening for years to these small numbers of recordings, what he really does.
No, there is no way, there is no system to his rubato, to his sense of phrasing. It is almost that at the moment he has decided that perhaps it should go here, the phrase I mean, and then on the next performance in another place. It's really quite miraculous. He actually recreates a recreation.
Right. We were reading from this extraordinary volume, The Amazing Marriage of Marie Eustace and Josef Hofmann. And this
yes, you were reading some of the programs, which...
Right. This was an American that he married, and she was...
the daughter of the governor of Louisiana.
Right, and I think later ambassador to France.
Right,
and,
right.
She was this
How much
New Orleans aristocratic lady who all of a sudden finds herself married to this famous touring pianist, and she's in Russia. She's in the snow. She's touring like in small towns. It's a fantastic thing, and she writes this diary, which was kept for years, and finally it was published. And she goes through everything about the concerts. It's an absolute document. And here we have a concert at St. Petersburg, Russian calendar, April 4th. The program was a tiny one compared to yesterday, but it was the Prelude and Fugue in E minor of Mendelssohn, followed by the Moonlight Sonata, followed by Kreisleriana of Schumann, followed by a Nocturne of Chopin, the Fantasy Impromptu, the E minor Waltz, the B minor Mazurka, and the B minor Scherzo. Finally, he gives you about 7 or 8 pieces of Anton Rubinstein, who in 1907 was, of course, still a gigantic name in Russia, and who, as we were discussing, was Hofmann's teacher for a time. Not in Russia, but in Dresden.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Anyway, she writes after that, this was a good concert, particularly the first part. The sonata was beautiful. The Schumann went well. Josef was angry because Schroeder, not of cartoon fame, I guess, had the tone of the piano softened without telling him. He knew the moment he touched it and thought at first it was another piano. Then the tuner confessed it had been taken out after the concert in the St. Petersburg Conservatory, and work was done on it. Hofmann's eyes got sharp. She says, I love Yef when he gets mad with someone else. His eyes get black and he gets so excited.
Yes. She even goes through how much money they made, and
everything. And
it's a marvelous critical review of someone that was obviously not a pianist, who understood her husband's playing so well.
And try to think of the ambiance of Russia, 1905. You know, it's still Tsarist world.
Right.
It's another mood entirely.
And since, of course, Hofmann was a royalist, as Chopin was, I'm sure that it was a most miraculous time for him.
You know, in an age of very great pianists in Russia, his sensations there were unequaled by any other pianist.
Yes, and of course, he was also playing the works of Scriabin and Rachmaninoff, as well as
Indeed,
Anton
and this
Rubinstein.
volume discusses when they're playing for each other. Matt, what do we have queued up? The Maiden's Wish?
Music? Yeah, Maiden's Wish.
Oh, yes. That Chopin list transcription that we played several days ago, but I think, without a doubt, the most extraordinary recording by Josef Hofmann.
That was the great Josef Hofmann playing the Chopin Liszt Maiden's Wish. And David, what elegance, what sound, what phrasing, what...
Yes, what sensibility to climax.
Yes.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's beyond belief. David, why don't you read something that you were looking at?
I will, but I think that we have a few things to do first, do we?
Yeah, Matt, why don't you do a couple of commercials? David has become excited again, as is his wont, exorbitantly excited. He has found something in the Amazing Marriage book written by Marie Eustace, Joseph, or Yef, as she called him.
Yes, Yef.
Yef Hofmann's first wife.
Right.
David, why don't you read it for us?
This is from the Russian tour, and I think this will truly interest you, Stan, as well as the audience.
I'm always interested in everything about Hofmann.
She writes, Yef was in great spirits and said he had played the last part well of the recital. He made a discovery and invention. He now calls Chopin cotton. It seems he has never been satisfied with the same piano for Chopin and other composers, say Liszt. When the piano is soft enough in tone for Chopin, it is not brilliant enough for Liszt. He often thought over the problem, and tonight it struck him that if he could produce on himself the effect he wanted, his fingers would translate it. In other words, if one tone sounded soft, his fingers would continue producing a soft tone. So he put cotton in his ears. It was a great piece of audacity to try such an experiment in the middle of such a concert, with the Chopin B minor sonata as well as many other works. But it succeeded wonderfully. It is difficult to explain, because most people would play louder with their ears stopped up. But Yef is fearfully sensitive to sound, and he says when he heard the too loud tones in Chopin, it shocked him, so it spoiled his mood and freedom in playing, whereas when he hears soft tones, his mood is to produce them, and his fingers follow his mood confidently. At any rate, he had a tremendous success and was satisfied with his own playing.
Amazing, David. And as usual, the great genius able to, at the moment on stage, decide he will do something and then does it, and it works out, of course, wonderfully for him.
It's like when Rubinstein says, well, I'm going to change this fingering tonight after having it in his nervous system for, 103 years.
Yes, yes.
But it's amazing. Stan, we are going to now hear one of the great, certainly...
the greatest piano record ever made.
Well,
you know how I love to say those things.
I understand your extravagance. However, there can be many that would think this is full of mannerism and excess and so forth, and of course their opinion is certainly valid. It is not what you would call the run-of-the-mill performance you are used to hearing. It's so full of experiment and shadows and tempo differentiations. And it certainly has amazed many connoisseurs, and again, as I said, it's a shame that it's not on a finer sound quality.
It also shows Hofmann, interestingly enough, in this record, at the height of his powers in a way that one does not really get in some of the other recordings that he made. The great surges of sound, which... the
sonority, which was supposed to be frightening in public, a tigerish surge coming from a pianissimo.
Yes, we seem to miss that generally in some of the poor quality of records, although this record, of course, is still not of good quality. However, it was something that he developed rather late. He apparently didn't have that great surge of sound until 1907, 1908, 1909, 1910, right. And then, of course, reaching its its zenith in 1925 to 1935, when he was at his greatest.
Yes, that would probably be his high point. And this comes from a Kazimir Hall performance in, I think, 1938 in Philadelphia. You know, he was the director of the Curtis Institute for a long time, and
Yes,
gave great prestige to that.
He saved them, really.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Let's hear the F minor Ballade of Chopin in Josef Hofmann's recording.
He just played an E flat. David,
there was a habit of modulating from piece to piece, and Matt was astonished. What's that? It sounds like another work, and that's why the audience laughed, because I don't think the E flat was expected right there for the F minor ballade.
But it does begin on a G, so it's a third below.
He had a tremendous sense of humor. And the audience, I think, understood that.
Even Matt.
The F minor Ballade now.
If you gasp anymore, David, I think you're going to faint.
Well, this is, of course, one of the extreme examples of the artist, the musical interpreter, imposing his unbelievable temperament on a masterpiece.
David, you said something very interesting about the coda and the way he plays the coda. Say that again.
What did I say?
Who remembers? No, you were talking about the modern quality he gives to
Oh,
Chopin.
yes. The coda is of such difficulty that when you hear it done by the average human being who can play very well just to attempt this coda, one has no idea of Chopin's audacity in 1843. This is as modern as one could
imagine.
Yeah,
David is stunned. He's having trouble finding words, which I understand because the performance is so overwhelming. Those great surges of sound, David, can you believe them?
No, I can't believe him, and I just wish I had been on stage so my eardrums could have been lacerated.
It would have been too frightening.
It was amazing. That was the F minor Ballade of Chopin, and I know that you have played this and played it well. And
well, I thought I did. I mean, I suppose everyone has that feeling.
Tell us about this coda, which is legendary in the piano literature.
Yes, it's fiercely difficult, of course. It contains great technical problems, the thirds, the holding of it together. But, you know, interestingly enough, the opening of the piece is probably the most difficult part of the piece. How to make the opening hang together the first few pages.
Yes, you notice that you could almost, because we're used to a very sentimental reading of this beautiful theme in F minor, Hofmann is so straight that you're at first saying, what kind of
well, it's classic.
Idiot.
Yes,
no, but
yeah.
it's please let's. Yeah. But he knows exactly what he's doing for the structure of the entire work, and of course the details of pianism are just remarkable.
Yes, it's an interesting offset to what comes later.
Right, and I think that's always how he must have thought in a larger structure, and this is why I so regret not having the large scale works.
Absolutely. What are we hearing next?
You know, I don't know. What are we hearing, Matt? Oh,
yes.
let's hear the E-flat Waltz, certainly one of Chopin's most famous works, and during Chopin's time, he was asked constantly in the evenings at the soirees, you must play the Nocturne in E-flat or the Grande Valse Brillante. This work certainly has the Paris of the 1830s stamped all over it. in some of his performances.
Yes, when particularly when all of a sudden out of nowhere comes a booming left hand, an octave or a chord that's there, but
Yes, for instance, you were saying, well, this is certainly not Cortot.
no.
Who is full of perfume and satin
And sheer elegance in
yes.
these.
And this is certainly a performance, of course, out to wow an audience, and yet, you know, it has this classical control. The text, in a sense, is not important to him. And talk.
Yeah, well, it's almost as he says in the book. Jef tends to become bored, and especially when he's playing in the provinces, he always feels that he must play a little quicker and do some things a little different to get everyone's interest.
Right, and of course, so there is this showman in him, and with all great performers, it doesn't matter in what field, there is this element of some would say. Not authentic element that wants to wow. Now, Hofmann had this less than anyone, I think, of his generation, with this amount of mechanism and this magnetism over an audience.
Yes, but the great difference, of course, between Hofmann and a Godowsky, who we have said before, probably had the greatest mechanism of all time, was that when Godowsky reached stage, he didn't communicate.
Right, and as you know, reaching stage from the practice room or living room is another world.
Totally. Everything is bigger than life, and Hofmann indeed made everything bigger than life, as he was bigger than life.
But this element of perversity interests me because I never thought of it that way. There is sometimes a mocking irony. Well, today I will try this, and of course it's part of the romantic temperament as well, and the imposing one's total viewpoint on the music. And today we're living in an age where the music is
yes, the Germans have
too
done
sacred.
The Germans have done it to
well,
us.
the Germanic stranglehold
Yes.
on music is now leaving, and this is why the repertory is opening. Thank goodness. We could really not play so many extraordinary tidbits and works of glorious pianistic intention, which just did not have, let's say, the musical quality of the Beethoven sonatas.
Yes.
There's room for all of it, and I'm glad to know that record companies have understood this.
David, let's go back, and I think that the F minor Ballade is such an extraordinary document that it will be well worth hearing again. But what I would like to do first, if you will permit me a luxury since I'm a guest, is that I would very much like to hear the Godowsky arrangement that Hofmann plays of the Minute Waltz, the one that he does in thirds. And I would just comment briefly, there are two versions of this, and the first one, of course, is played very fast and totally different than the second. The second one is slowed down. And
The one we'll hear now,
yes. And it's almost as though he was slowing it down intentionally so that when the double thirds came, they would, of course, sound even faster. Not that Jef, if you'll pardon the familiarity, couldn't do it, but I think that to play it as fast, of course, as he did the other version would have been nigh unto impossible even for that great man.
Let's hear this one then, yes.
This is the Godowsky arrangement of the Minute Waltz by Chopin.
No, you know, actually, it's Hoffmann's own arrangement.
Is it?
Yes, yes.
Because the Godowsky has the thirds all the way through, and then Hofmann literally surprises you when the first part returns in the
Right.
bass section.
You know, the Minute Waltz, and Donald Garvelman, who was here recently discussing the songs, has a wonderful volume on the Minute Waltz. Many transcriptions from Sorabji to Boogie Woogie in a very lavishly produced volume of different versions of this piece, which has been played by Hofmann to organ grinders on the street.
Right.
And even Barbara Streisand has tried her
Yes,
with
quite
it.
wonderfully. Do you know whether the Hofmann transcription is published or not?
I don't think it was.
Probably not. Let's hear it, Matt, please.
Well,
That was the Hofmann transcription, as David has corrected me. I corrected him on a date and found out, of course, I was wrong. It is true that David probably is never wrong, at least in terms of these things. David,
I am
we don't
wrong daily.
Yes, but not about music. David, we don't have time to hear the Ballade, right?
Yes, and now, how about...
You've left me in midair, you know that.
I know, I know. How about deciding...
Well, why don't we hear the
Stoyevsky, yes, a friend of Hoffman's, and it's a terrible piece, but he plays it very well. Oriental, Opus 10, number 2, and it's also part of the encores of this Kazimir Hall recital. What a pity that we again have Hofmann playing often second-rate music.
Yes, yes, it really is. However, we still get the great artistry. Has Matt found it yet? We've done it to Matt again.
What Matt goes through on these programs. Oh, that was absolutely vulgar and wonderful.
It's a work, as you said, that was not played before or since.
Indeed, indeed. That was Josef Hofmann in Sigismund Stiavsky's Oriental.
Opus
And this
10.
was a very important man at one time, and he was the prime student of Paderewski and made a great career in America, and a few of his pieces were well known. This wasn't.
Obviously. David, we're going to continue again with,
You'll still be in town?
How can I leave with Hofmann going on?
Okay, we will continue with movements from the concertos and the Chopin concertos, G minor ballade, and perhaps we'll hear the F minor ballade again.
Maybe the Rubinstein D minor, slow movement, perhaps?
Absolutely.